So far, we have really focused on creating building elements, architectural building elements, like walls and floors and furnishing and all that kind of good stuff. However, the time has come, I'm afraid, to go outside of our building and create some of the site information. And if you remember, hopefully, we are using Lumion to render our projects. And even if you're not using Lumion, but some other program, you might find that they have internal site creation techniques that require a little bit of strategy when you are modeling your site. And here I have a lovely 3D diagram of Endicott College in beautiful Beverly, Massachusetts. And what you'll see on the site here is that the elements that Lumion can create really well are things like landscaping, trees, grass, all of the soft landscape design elements. The things that you probably should render or create in Revit are things like roads and parking lots, even things like playing fields. Those are best to model. Those hard architectural elements, those should be modeled in Revit. So how do you go about creating these elements? Well, some of them, if you have a really simple site, you might as well just create them using the simple masses that we have learned before. Go to Massing and Site, create an in-place mass. You can even call it something like road, and OK. And if the road itself is flat, and obviously that's the easiest situation. It's really simple. I mean, we could use a floor too. You could just come in, draw a box for the road, considering the dimension of typical roads. As we have learned, when you create a mass in this way, you just create a solid form, which has some kind of architectural height, and we can come in and stretch it up or down. Whoops. And to get to the dimension that we want for our road. And I just made it about 6 inches. And the beauty of doing masses, maybe I'll finish that mass, and is that you have a lot of flexibility. They're really easy to edit. Let's say I want a sidewalk. I could easily copy this mass over here. And it's just so easy to edit. If you're designing, you're not sure what you want, you can come in, stretch it. And I, of course, could edit the sketch. I could change the dimensions more precisely, but pretty quickly you can get, you can kind of build things up, even if you just want some retaining walls or something like that. Masses are awfully easy. And they're also great if you, say, want a patio or a landing somewhere in the building, like around the back of our building. Maybe we want a little solid surfacing back here. That's a perfect way to make an irregular shape, a round shape, whatever you want. Massing in place is super easy. But however you create your surfaces, one thing, do remember to paint them something different. Again, that helps if you've actually created some materials. I created a couple here. I can just come in and paint it. And of course, as you remember, in Revit, you can also apply materials inside the family if you are so inclined. So there you go. In this case, I'm painting, you can see just surfaces here. The other good thing about masses is that if you wanted to create something like, I don't know, a curb on this side, you could also do that using massing tools. In that case, though, because it has a profile, I would do a model in place component. And in that case, be sure to choose the site type of family. Choose site and OK. And then you can create a curb, probably using a sweep. Draw a sweep and draw the path and the profile. I'll use the pick path feature, grab that 3D edge there, and then I will draw the profile here, come in here. And nice thing about this is it's easy to draw kind of relative to the edge that you created. So I can maybe draw up a little curb with an angle to it. Maybe a top piece of 1 inch or 2. You can also make it go down below the surface, which again is kind of handy because sooner or later you're going to end up doing a site section. These will show up very nicely in site section. So click the checkbox and the checkbox, and like magic, you have yourself a component, a model in place component that you can use in any situation, which is super handy. And you can see here in section how nice that looks. For it to look right as far as materials goes, do make sure that when you edit your mass or when you create your mass, whatever it is, that you actually assign the materials inside the mass, that you come in here and in the properties menu, just give it a proper material assignment, and that'll work both here in Revit and in your rendering software. And the other nice thing about masses is they're easy to select and move, more or less, and I can just grab them here and drag them over to my building, and maybe I'll have the sidewalk come right up against the building, and it will tell me, oh, hey, you're breaking some rules because of the work plane that the masses were created on. I'm just going to remove those, and now I can drag this thing over to wherever I wanted. Now, pretty quickly, you can see that there are some disadvantages to these types of objects because some of these objects were created with a reference plane and some were not. And now they've become all kind of discombobulated. And of course, I can use my align tool and stretch out my sidewalk. I could even lock it to the building. And in this case, I can nudge it up and down because this one was not created with a reference plane, so I could get it just the right height, but the others I can't nudge them because they were created with reference planes. So maybe it's time to learn the other new feature in Revit, or the new feature in Revit, which is Toposolids. So Toposolids are on the Massing and Site tab, which is probably what you'd expect for something you need to make a building site. And Toposolids here, there's the basic way to create it is you just click on the dot here. Basically, you can sketch a site, and let's start by doing that. I'll click on Toposolid, and oh, it's telling me my work plane is not adequate, so I guess I better make sure that my work plane is set correctly. I'll go to the Architecture tab, set my work plane, and I guess I'm drawing on a wall. That's not really going to work now, is it? So let's go to the ground floor. And if you are working on a complex project with complex sites, you may have your own site or grade level. I don't have one of those, so I'm just going to go with the ground floor. And you see Revit highlights that for me. Click OK. And now I can draw my site, and I'm going to stick in 3D view here because it is easier to kind of see the end result. So let's go to the view from above, and I'll create myself a nice big Toposolid. Again, create Toposolid. Now it's happy as can be. The simplest way to draw them is you actually just draw a big rectangle where the site is. So I'll just click and drag. And, oh, I don't know, let's go by 300 by, I don't know, 170. Doesn't really matter because we just want some site context. And I'll click Finish Edit Mode. And it will tell you if it detects any floors in your project, it will tell you that those overlap. It does not kind of work its way around the building. It actually literally goes through the building. And that's a problem we'll get to later on. But otherwise, you can see it creates a big flat surface, and that can have properties. So if I select it, and you'll see here, first of all, it has general properties. I can change the offset. So for example, if I want there to be a step up to the first floor, I can type in a dimension, in this case -6 inches, and apply, and you should see the Toposolid move down ever so slightly. And these Toposolids are somewhat similar to, say, a floor. If I select it here, you'll see that there are a number of family types. I think generic 20-foot is the standard one. Except I'm editing it. I didn't mean to do that. I'm just going to select it here so you can see what happens when I change it. Generic 20-foot thick site just gives you a kind of a floor, a ground that is just made of no material at all, and just a generic material. And the grassland, 16 inches, that gives you a site with multiple layers. So it is actually possible, if you go into this type, you can choose edit structure, and you'll see, just like a floor or a wall, that there's a finish layer with one kind of material, and you can actually have substrates, structures. You can really build up the structure any which way that you want. And each of these has their own kind of use, 4-foot or 4-inch planks. 8-inch concrete. Again, when we render these, we are looking for the finished material. That's our main concern. It's other situations where we're creating, say, architectural details, site sections, where we're more concerned with some of these kind of inner bits and pieces. Now, if your site is sloped, you have a couple of options. The simplest way to create a slope site is just, I'm going to double click on this to edit the sketch, and you can add a slope arrow. Again, this is very similar to the way floors and ceilings can work. You draw in that slope arrow. I guess I probably should draw it straight, because if you draw it at a funny angle, it will slope it at a funny angle. And you can just control the dimension, the offset at the head or the tail. So if I want this to go down, say, minus 10 feet, I just type that in and apply. And of course, nothing looks different here. But now when we take a look at our site, you should see that it has modified itself. Now, that's one way to do a site. I'm going to hit undo, Control Z, to get rid of that angle there, that slope arrow, because the other way, let's just check out of this, is to modify the site sub-elements. Now, what you do is you select the site, the Modify Sub-Elements option comes up, click on that, and now what you'll see is the boundary of the site and these kind of dashed green lines. And I can move these dashed green lines, I can kind of drag them. It may or may not give me an error. I guess I shouldn't have moved it that way. I can also, I suppose I should have moved it up. There we go. You can see the site get kind of thicker, kind of wedge-shaped. I can also move individual points if I so desire. Let's see, I can do that. Make the site kind of a, I don't know what, a E-shape maybe? I don't know. Finally, you can actually add in individual points. I'm going to click on Add a Point, and there are two ways to do it. You can choose Add Elevation from some reference point on the surface, or from, if I choose this option here, it will basically add it at whatever your current level is, and you can define an offset from that. So either one works, and either one will start creating some geometry for you. So let's say I just want this to go down 2 feet from the current level. Now I can go, and maybe this is something that's good to do in the top view. You can see that as I start adding points, and it may or may not give me an error because I don't know what I clicked on. I guess I'm making that point too low, but you can see that it's starting to warp the site. To finish editing these points, you just click on the Modify tool, and you'll see that it creates your site, and it even creates the contours. And if something's off, for example, I seem to be having some issues over here, I can come in and I can add more points. Let me just click on the wall and choose Modify Sub-Elements. And I can drag these points around, see how it can modify them. I can also move them up or down. And it's a little tricky because you see I get that error message. I moved it too far. I basically moved it below the surface that is the rest of the Toposolid, but I can move it up or down with the individual buttons. And anyway, so that's how you can create a site in a real simple manner. Also note that, like I was having a little trouble getting that exact point to move in the direction I want. We are in 3D, and these are kind of very amorphous objects. So one thing you can do is use your view cube. I'll just click on my left face of my view cube so that it snaps the model into a position that I can kind of read a little bit better. And now I can try dragging this contour point down. This graphic point, I'm trying to remember what I'm trying to get. I think I'm trying to get below the deck here. And that makes it an awful lot easier than trying to kind of do it in 3 dimensions. Again, those of you familiar with SketchUp, you know that once you start modifying kind of organic shapes in 3D, it can get pretty complicated. So on our site, the big thing is that the slab, the site slab, should be about 6 inches below the surface of the landing of the door, which we handled by moving the whole site. And I would like you to try and create one point that's taller than the others. And again, the big thing is getting used to experimenting with these site warping tools. In sites that don't have a lot of slopiness to them, you might not even see a lot of contours, and frankly, sometimes people don't like the contours. These can be controlled in any number of ways. First of all, to control how many contours, just select the site Toposolid, choose Edit Type, and what you'll see here in the properties is the contour display option. I'll click on that. And you can control how frequently they occur. So in this site, I actually don't want them the major values to occur every 5 feet. I want to make them every 1 feet, and maybe I'll have contours, subcontours show up every 3 inches. When I hit apply and OK and apply and OK, and you should see a lot more contours show up in my site plan. And you can also use your visibility and graphic overrides, VG, go down to the site section, and you should be able to modify the landscape elements as well. Oh, I mean under, not under site, under Toposolid. That's where these guys are. You can turn on and off these contour lines or turn them on. They won't render, so, and they are actually kind of handy to see how your site is created. So adding roads and sidewalks onto our beautiful site is a little different than just adding solid masses, but it's actually pretty easy. And what you do is you can use the subdivide tool. And what this does, I'll leave the little mouse up, is it defines an area within the Toposolid. It kind of creates a itty-bitty little solid on top of the base solid. And the way it works, I'm going to go to the top view so I can get a nice orthographic look. And let's start by drawing the sidewalk. And so I'll click Subdivide, and I'll draw in a rectangle for the sidewalk here. And let's say the sidewalk, we know it wants to be up against the building, so we can drag it up against the building. And we also know that it wants to be, say, 8 feet wide. So I can just type in 8 and enter. Oops, except now I made it move. But you get the idea. We can move this guy up against the building here quite easily. And then just click the checkbox. And what it does is it creates kind of a little, I don't know, a little slab on top of the site. And this slab can be modified, just a little bit anyway. If you click on it, you see it's a separate element from the site, and it has its own properties. So I could make the site sidewalk maybe 1 inch instead of a whole foot. Okay, see how it gets a lot thinner. Or maybe I want to make it something like 4 inches, since that's probably a good average thickness for concrete. And I can also add the drive, the road, and any other features that are flat like this, or graded like this, right on top of the site. Again, just select the site, choose Subdivide, and again, I would recommend being in top view, and in this case, maybe I'll draw it line by line so that I can control the dimension a little better. Let's say there's an 8-foot parking lane, and then a 12-foot drive, and maybe another 12 feet on for the opposite direction. You end up with what did that all add up to? Probably 34. Okay. Oh, except I don't think I got that to be 34, did I? No, I got it to be 32. There you go. Can't get good help anymore. So anyway, let me complete my line here. And again, the beauty of this is even though the site is sloping, I can draw these orthographically, and I'll click the checkbox. And once again, you've got a thickness for the road. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. First of all, this might look funny in a site section. So if you are doing site sections in Revit, what you'll end up with is the grass and the roads, they all kind of look a little odd. Because they're all kind of sitting on top of a site. So one way that you can get around this is, let's say I make the road, we'll leave it at a foot. I can kind of build up from the original site almost as if you were coming in with truckloads of asphalt and truckloads of concrete. So maybe this ends up being 1 foot 4 inches. See how it can get a little bit bigger. So I get myself a little curb right next to it. But then you have the problem of you have this drop off next to the building. So we have to add one more subsurface here. I'll just choose subdivide, go to the top view. Oh, except we probably, well, whatever, we can do it in this particular view. I'll add in one more surface to bring the rest of the site up to that sidewalk height. I'll click there to complete it. And again, it gives me this error message that there's a floor that's causing us problems. If I select this final one, this one should probably match the sidewalk, 1 foot 4. And I can paint each of these a different material. And that way, when I get to my rendering software, I'll have easy control. And like we saw before, you can select that surface, and you can actually just apply the material right here in the Properties menu. That's probably a good idea. So let's see, there must be some grass in here somewhere. Not glass, but grass. And it should change the material here. One last way you can tweak your site is to grab the site, and I have left a little nubbin of my site exposed here. Remember these top surfaces? You can't edit the actual Toposolid. Those are just kind of, I don't know, toppers for your Toposolid. And I can select this and choose Add Split Line. And what this does, see how it gives me the boundary of my site, and it is, interesting enough, sensitive to the dashed line, which is a little mysterious to me, but such is life. But you can click and drag, or just click, and make sure you click somewhere on either a sideline or on another contour. And what it will do, it will kind of divide up the site based on that line that you drew. You see how one line did not have to go all the way to the edge? It's kind of a way of creating folds in your site. And why is this valuable? Well, if I choose modify sub-elements and I want to, I don't know, move one of these pieces, it will essentially fold the site based on that edge line. And this is great if you have a kind of easily, a site with easy straight dividing lines between the contours. And one thing to be aware of, all this fiddling around on the site, I have kind of messed up my height. Absolutely, I can come in like we did before, go to the left view, and I can select my site and either nudge it down. Again, it will give me these error messages, or if I know an exact dimension, I think it's actually 2 feet. Let's try that, or 1 foot 10. Move it down that way. Oh, not up, down, -2 feet. There we go. Again, it will give me the highlighted Toposolid error message. I guess I was wrong. Maybe it needs to go down a little bit more. I think I didn't add up my Toposolid and the topping surfaces quite correctly. But you can keep nudging it up and down until you get the sidewalk about 6 inches below. I think I have to go down another, I think 4 inches. I think that's the, yep, that looks about right. You can see there's a little bit of a step up. And this is typical in most climates. Not exactly the most accessible front entrance, but that's why we have the accessible route around the back. As I mentioned at the start, you do want to be able to render this, and perhaps you want to render the whole thing in Lumion, but sometimes you don't. And the way that you can kind of prep this model is you can just hide the stuff you don't want to see. So for example, I can select the site topper in the back and then the kind of base Toposolid, and I can just hide those. And when I hide them, I'll just make sure you choose elements, not category. You can see that all that's left is my drive and this back slab here, which apparently has moved up it's moved up in the world, so I should move that down below so that it doesn't land on top of my ramp. Okay, there we go. That looks much better. Anyway, so that's a way that you can just have those hard surfaces that I mentioned. Obviously, any components that are on your site, for example, these trees, these are Revit trees. So I don't want these in here because I'm going to be using Lumion trees, which are much more fun to put in than Revit things. I also probably don't need this weird geometric solid in the background. If you want to keep that in, you can in your projects. But in my case, I think I might find a way to delete that little thing. One last thing that would be good to create for our site are some of those linear features like curbs and retaining walls. Now, again, I mentioned that we won't be doing a lot of these features in Revit, just these hardscape features. So retaining walls, in theory, you could do this using the graded regions or lines, split lines, but I think I'm just going to draw them as railings. And you might say, railings? What are you talking about? Well, I learned this from the Balkan architect, who is a genius at Revit. And if you ever need to learn anything, he is the one to go to. And it's a great idea, super simple to do. And first of all, what you do, I'm going to add in a railing, and we all know how to do that, right? You click the Architecture tab, click on Railing, and I could either draw it or I could just select a line. Maybe I'll just draw it because I'm not sure where that one's going. And I'll put it right here, go all the way from one edge of the sidewalk to the other, and click check. And you might say, that's kind of silly. And sometimes the railing actually does a nice job of connecting to your site. Sometimes it doesn't. So you might have to click on the railing and choose Pick New Host. I think I'll pick the sidewalk here. And again, notice how it finds the subdivision, not the base solid. If you choose the base solid, the railing will be a little bit underground. Now, what does this railing get me? Well, it doesn't really, it gets me kind of a barrier between my main spot, my main road and the parking area. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom profile that's a curb for our walkway here. And you just go to File, New, Family, and scroll down in the list until you find Profiles. And I'll just go over here and choose Profile, Rail. And the reason is because rails are what the magic that railings are made of is rails. So I'll click New Rail, and basically it gives you a blank section drawing, or maybe this is floor plan. No, it is floor plan. And you can draw the profile of your railing any which way you want. Now, I'm going to assume that the top of the rail is probably going to be the reference plane, or the rail top is going to be the reference plane that this comes in on. So maybe I'll draw my railing up. Let's draw it up, I don't know, 3 inches, draw a little angled piece, draw it over a little bit, so we get a nice shape. You can see that's kind of curb shaped, maybe a little big. Maybe I should have drawn it over there. And I can move this around so that it occurs conveniently on my reference planes, or I'll just lock it onto the reference plane. Here we go. There we go. And I could curve this. I could modify this kind of chamfer in any which way that I want. That looks good. Okay, and there's my section, and I'm going to save this onto my computer. And let's just call it curb, because that's a great name for this. And then load it into our project and close the main model. Here we go. And now what we have, you can see that we're back in our main model. Let's go to the 3D view. We still have this railing here, but we know how to do railings, don't we? If we edit the type and duplicate it, we can call the new one something like curb, okay? And then we're going to edit the rail structure. And right now, there are no railings, so let's insert one. New rail at the ground, and we can choose the profile that we just created, which we cleverly named curb. And apply, and OK. And now, let's check the baluster placement. I'm not sure, we probably don't really need any balusters in this one. So just choose, under the baluster family, choose none. And same with all these start and end ones. You don't want any balusters because that would also be kind of funny. Choose none for all of them and hit apply and OK and apply and OK. And like magic, you have yourself, oh, I think I left a, I think I left a railing in there somewhere. But you can see here's the railing that I created. And I guess I got my reference plane wrong. I guess the reference plane is the top edge of this profile. So I can go back in and open up that profile and change the location of the top of the curb. And of course, there's all sorts of subtleties. If you want the curb to be, I don't know, an inch or two above the adjacent surface, by all means, leave yourself a little lip there so that you get kind of a shadow reveal. Again, just kind of depends on the look that you want. I'll choose that and load it into the project and close it. And yeah, I guess I probably better save those changes, huh? All right, and it will, when I overwrite the existing one and its parameters, it should do the trick and drop it down. You see how that looks? Whoa, a lot better. If I could find it and zoom in on it, that looks a lot better. Finally, we want to remove the top rail, that thing that's kind of floating up there here. Just uncheck the box next to use top rail, and again apply and OK, and like magic the top rail disappears. So there's your curb, and that's a great way to modify your make an easy curb that kind of snaps to the contours. That's the biggest thing. We need that curb to follow the contours along with our roads and sidewalks. So these are super handy. How do you make a retaining wall? Well, it's basically the same way. And here's that retaining wall that I put in my project. Same thing, just made it into a railing family. Here's my railing retaining wall. Choose edit type, and you'll see here that I made kind of a same kind of thing, a profile, maybe a little chamfer at the top, and basically duplicated the curb railing type to create this retaining wall. And you can hide everything else in your model, and that ends up being one of those hard features that can show up nicely in your Revit model. Also notice that in addition to creating the rail structure, you can apply the material here too. This is how your railings are occurred, so you can come in and pick your material on this menu. So in the end, you should have a lovely looking site with base Toposolid, and then these subdivided Toposolid toppers for the main part of the site, sidewalk, and a roadway. You should also have a retaining wall and a curb created with a custom profile. And the specifics of the slope of the site are not as important to me as learning how to use these basic tools, but as long as there's a little bit of a slope, then I'm a happy camper. Now, I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't show you some other ways of generating site geometry besides kind of picking points. First of all, professionally, you might have site surveys where they have point clouds, individual points where they have taken elevation readings, and you can actually add those point clouds into your Revit file, create a Toposolid from that. We don't have access to any site surveys, but we do have access to SketchUp. And if you remember from SketchUp, there is the ability to geolocate your model. And you can actually get terrain straight out of SketchUp. This model has the terrain in it. And we can export it as a 3D model. And from SketchUp, just choose AutoCAD file. And there are some options here, faces or faces and edges. It doesn't seem to make a difference to me, or it doesn't seem to make a difference to Revit. Maybe SketchUp is happier. But anyway, you can export that model directly, and we can bring that model into Revit. I'm going to put this in a blank project here so I don't mess up my original. But you can import CAD, and you might say, hey, you know, how am I going to use a CAD file? Make sure that it's searching for Revit, or I'm sorry, for DWG files. And here we go. I finally figured out where I saved that file. And always make sure that you choose manual center of, and that'll kind of give you a handle on the center of the geometry file. It also probably would be a good idea to go to the site plan view here. I think I'm not doing that. Anyway, when I import the CAD file, let's see, should give us a nice big file. All right, apparently I'm cropping my view. Let's make that a little, oh boy, that's a big site. I guess that's not surprising that it's a big site here. Let's just not crop the view at all. And there's the geometry, and let's go to the 3D view, and you should see the geometry of our site. In this case, it actually has both layers visible here. If you select this model, choose Query, and grab the top site, you should be able to figure out which layer. Oh, it's on Location Snapshot. We can go to our visibility and graphic overrides. Not that we really need to. Go to Imported Categories and turn off that layer and apply and OK. And there's that beautiful topographic geometry. How do you create a site from that? Well, pretty straightforward. Go to Massing and Site. Go to Toposolid, but instead of create from sketch, let's create from import. And you have two options, create from comma separated value, which is an Excel file, essentially, or create from CAD. We'll create from CAD, click on the model. Of course, it's a SketchUp model that has multiple SketchUp tags or layers in them. So make sure you choose the one that has the actual 3D geometry in it. And I'll click OK. And what it will do is it will generate a Toposolid based on your model. Let's hide that original import here. I'm just going to turn this off here using my filter. Right-click on it and choose Hide and View Elements so that I can see the Toposolid in all its glory. And you can see it does a very nice job, and it's a Toposolid that we can edit as we did before. And that's really a great way to do it. If you have access to SketchUp, if you want 3D buildings that you can edit, which is frequently a problem that we have, we want to be able to edit these buildings. And if most of our rendering software does have some access to, say, OpenStreetMaps, I know Lumion does, and it can kind of load in some basic geometry, but you can't really edit that all that well. However, you can go to cadmapper.com, and there's a site where you can also download a SketchUp file or AutoCAD or Rhino or any of these other options, apparently not Revit directly. And what it will do is it will give you a model of whatever site that you have chosen. Again, the site, because it's free, you're only allowed a small amount, but you can create the file and download it. And I got the SketchUp file because this is the kind of thing SketchUp excels at, is simple editing of the model. You can see it's got several layers, but one of them is the topography. That's the one with the 3D geometry. If you also need the contour lines, those are available. And then you can see there's roads, and all these things are actually kind of handy. You can imagine things like this being really nice. Especially, remember, we are in SketchUp, but we could export this as a CAD file. And a flattened CAD file, and you can do, say, Illustrator illustrations with that, or of course open it in CAD. But finally, each of these buildings, I've just kind of exposed them. You can edit them. They're objects. So when you have something like OpenStreetMap, which doesn't really know how tall the buildings are, you can make these the appropriate height pretty quickly. And then save your SketchUp file like we did before, export it as a CAD file format like we did before. And now here's our model that we created, but it does have the buildings in it, which is awfully handy. Of course, when we go to create a Toposolid, it works pretty much exactly the same way. Toposolid from import, create from CAD, click on this object. Of course, there are a lot more layers in this, so you do have to, not choose all the ones that aren't going to help you out. But it will create a site for you. And in this case, maybe that's fine. And once again, you can go and hide all the other layers in your visibility and graphic overrides and imported categories. And we can hide all these menus, all these elements, except for the buildings. And now we've got a site with buildings on it that you can render in any which way you please. One last thing I wanted to throw out there, it's not part of what we will be learning because we will be doing our landscape in just Revit, but there is a program out there if you find that you do have complex landscape designs to create. It's called Environment for Revit, and it is free for students. And boy, you can do some really nice stuff if you look at this site here. There's a lot of hard and soft features that you can create and render them in different ways. And this is really the only way to create this geometry inside Revit. I think particularly for design studios or projects that are focused on the landscape design, this is kind of the only way that you're going to be able to do it in Revit because so many of these features are just, it's hard to mix the hard and soft features in our rendering software. So anyway, and there is a terrific video by the Balkan architect, as I mentioned, in addition to there being some tutorials here on the Arch Intelligence website, which are the people that publish this software. So that's something for future study and definitely something that is very powerful and amazingly free. I'm still kind of stunned that they offer such great tools without charging. So that's site design in Revit.